Welcome, Simon, to Retreats and Offsites Unpacked. You and I have a very long history, so I'm incredibly excited to talk to you about it publicly. Um, Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let me read your bio very quickly for listeners so they know who we're talking to. Dr. Simon Rakoff is a performance psychologist with more than 25 years of experience helping execs, teams, athletes, and performers grow, develop, and excel. Simon's proprietary and proven approach cultivates three specific abilities that are fundamental to success: focus, relaxation, and connection. Simon is an experienced facilitator, having worked with leadership teams across a wide range of industries. He's a former career firefighter, paramedic, and technical rescue specialist, which probably comes in useful when dealing with hostile teams. His time working in public safety taught him how to work closely with the team effectively, even in high stress situations, and became the basis of Simon's approach to helping teams and individuals achieve peak performance. Welcome again.
Thanks.
And I'll share with the audience that a bit of a disclaimer. Simon and I have worked together for years. He was the coach of my last company, and I'll talk a little bit about how that was exceptionally helpful. But Simon, I want to start by talking about your background and digging in a little more about how safety and law enforcement and all those things have played a role in how you show up to facilitation.
Yeah, it's funny because when you read the bio, we don't read our own bios very often. So it's easy to sort of forget all the things that have occurred to get us to where we are now. And as I listened to you read it, I was thinking, because, it's been coming up on 30 years since I left the fire service. And so, I forget sometimes about how impactful that really was for me as a person developing as a, young man turning into whoever I was going to be, but also in terms of the skill set that it gave me for the rest of my life. And so there's just something special about being involved with a group, often a big group of people, sharing those experiences and learning how to work together under what can be very stressful circumstances. And so it's for me, it's been a set of skills that's really kind of come with me and developed and gotten better and better over the course of my life.
That makes sense. For a second, I went to go work at FEMA, and I had this like vision of getting together with a team and going on site and like saving lives. But then I realized the public sector wasn't for me when I didn't even get a tour of the office for about a week since I joined. And I was like, God, these people just don't understand onboarding. Um, Speaking of onboarding, when you start working with a team, I did not know that you had this fire service first responder background. And it kind of makes sense because I think when you start working with a team, you show up pretty chill. Um, and your whole presence is chill. Like your vibe is like pretty relaxed. How are you relaxed given this anxiety you went through in saving lives and being a first responder?
Yeah, the kind of the unwritten mantra of first responders is bring the calm. That's really a lot of our job, right? Is that, you know, we interact with people who in many cases are having the worst day of their life. And so in addition to the technical skills to be able to, put their fire out at their house or to, extricate them from their, upside down car or whatever it may be, that stuff's certainly important, but really a lot of what we're doing is just bringing a calmness to the situation. And by doing that, it's infectious, right? Just like stress and anxiety is infectious. When you're around somebody who's got a high level of stress, it's easy to take on some of that and easier for a group to magnify it. The same thing works the other way, right? And so, and I think that may be the most important skill that I ever learned was how to just come into a new situation and be calm and transmit that calmness, and hopefully it will, kind of spread and propagate.
So you have some specific skills that introduce calmness, and I think part of it is your martial arts experience in Aikido, I believe. Um, And so talk a little bit about, because I remember sometimes, you and I, like I said, work together. Sometimes and I'll talk about a little bit the dynamic, but sometimes you'd be like, okay, well, let's start with this exercise of grounding yourself. And I'm like, well, dude, I want to talk about this, this, this jerk of a coworker. Um, Walk us through why this relaxation piece is important and how you realized there's a connection between relaxation and showing up as a great teammate.
Yeah, and it's really the three things, right? It's the ability to focus, the relaxation, and also the ability, as you know, and you've gotten so good at over the years, to really connect authentically to other people. And so, but the relaxation is really critical for a couple of reasons, but primarily because when you learn to relax, and as you said, Aikido was the mechanism that really helped me learn how to do this. But when you learn how to do it, the perception of the world really gets different. And I don't mean to sound obtuse, but even the way that time passes gets different. And so if you can be in a relaxed state, and when I say relaxed, I mean the mind, if you can have a relaxed mind as often as possible, as things come at you that maybe would normally make you angry or frustrated, or, that relaxation it buys you time. It lets you experience the thing that's happening at a slower rate, which lets you make different choices about what you're going to do. And so the focus and the connection are also critically important, but the relaxation is really the first part of being able to get to those other things. And as you know, it's not easy to just will yourself into a relaxed mind. If somebody's wound up, and you might hear somebody else look at them and say, "Hey, just relax." But it's not that easy. If it were that
So
easy,
fucking annoying when I
yeah, yeah,
hear
yeah.
that.
But if it was easy as that, then we wouldn't ever have a problem with the kind of tension that we do, right? And so my approach, which I developed myself from my Aikido training, uses the physical body to relax the mind, and you've experienced that, and hopefully seen the power of that. But I find it to be a remarkably effective tool. But you have to practice.
So, one of the tools you taught me is to brush my teeth without trying to do multitask. Um, can you share something else that listeners can potentially introduce? Because our target audience here are retreat facilitators. What's one technique, besides like the mindfulness minute or something like that? What's like one technique somebody can introduce to a team in order for everybody to kind of lower the temperature?
Yeah, sure. And let me just say, with regards to that everything is about habits, right? And so every time you do something, you're practicing it. You're strengthening the habit of doing it. So a good example, simple example is if you join a gym on January 1st, as a lot of people do, and then you don't go for the first 2 weeks, you're inculcating in yourself the habit of not going to the gym, right? And if that's the habit you want to have, then that's what you should keep doing. But if you want your habit to be to go to the gym, then you have to do that. And if you do it for long enough, that habit becomes kind of your default, your norm. 60 days is the scientific literature seems to suggest, and I found that to be pretty close to true. So the toothbrushing is a great little, you can think of it as like a micro habit, right? And so for your viewers, the practice is when I'm brushing my teeth, all I'm thinking about is brushing my teeth. And when I notice that my mind has wandered off, like as maybe halfway through, I'll realize, oh, now I'm not thinking about brushing my teeth. I'm now thinking about the meeting that I've got to go to in an hour. And then I want to take that opportunity just to bring my mind back to brushing the teeth, the feeling of the toothbrush in my hand, the feeling of the bristles on my teeth and my gums. And so it's really as small as that. And by doing that, those micro practices, that I'm creating new habits with my mind, where I'm basically training myself to keep my mind in the moment and not letting it go to the future or to the past, which is something the human mind is, of course, wanting to do most of the time. So, in terms of other things that people can do, the brushing teeth is a great one, and I find even now it's hard. Like I catch myself every morning, and my mind is sort of darted off. What happens is I get better at bringing it back pretty quickly, right? So instead of 20 seconds have gone by, it'll be a second or two, and I'll realize what happened. And so it's still good practice. But, you can do the same thing brushing your hair. You can do the same thing walking down a hallway. The idea is whatever you're doing at the moment, your mind is only doing that thing. So as I'm walking, maybe if I go into a shopping mall or even out, in my neighborhood for a walk, that I try to just think about walking, which means the feeling of my feet touching the ground and, trying to keep my body as relaxed as possible, only using the muscles that I need to. So I'm doing whatever I can to just be engaged in that thing. Just like right now, I'm doing what I can to only be here talking to you and not let my mind go somewhere else, because getting to the third thing, that connection to other people, as long as I can stay here connected to you, something great could happen. We could have a great conversation. We could become even closer, over the course of 45 minutes or whatever. So, that's a kind of a quick explanation of another practice. Sitting in the car is a good one. If you drive a car, writing with a pen or a pencil is a great one, because you can sort of just think about the feeling of your hand on the pen, not pushing down too hard onto the paper.
So it sounds like that's a really good reason to work with both executives as well as teams, because obviously we can't brush our teeth at an exec meeting, although that'd be fun. So talk to me a little bit about the power of working both with individuals as well as a team in the same engagement, because that's what we did, and we'll then follow up on how effective your work was for our team. But let's start with why it's important to coach one-on-one and then this team at the same time.
Sure, yeah. Well, let's start with the thing that most of my clients are trying to accomplish, and that is they're trying to achieve some degree of success, whatever that means to them, in their business, right? And so they're often not doing it alone. They've got a group of people around them, just as you did. And so from sort of the opening argument, you have to say, well, if this team is going to maximize their success and achieve whatever the things are that they want to do, it's, we want to get to $100 million in revenue, or we want to sell the company for $1 billion, or whatever it may be. If you think, well, if the CEO is functioning on all cylinders and really like focused and clear and really driving, that's great. Imagine if the entire team is in the same place at the same time, right? And the things that a team can accomplish when they're synchronized, when they're focused. And so that's really the whole point. And when I started doing this work, 16, 17 years ago, I started working just with individuals. It was, my client would be the CEO, or, sometimes my client would be like an athlete on a sports team or something like that. And a couple of years into it, I realized as great results as those folks were getting, there was still a little bit of a limitation in a group setting, because their performance was exceptional, but they were still limited to some extent by all the things, the performance that was happening around them, right? And so even if I'm a pitcher and I want to, be able to throw a 102-mile-an-hour fastball, and I'm starting from 98, even if I get to 102 and now I can pitch really fast, I still need a lot of other things to happen to win ball games and to, win pennants and to win championships. So, and the same thing is true with companies, right? Like if the CEO is performing in a way that's sort of peak top of their game, that's excellent. But you still need other people to also be there. And so that was the thinking. And as I've kind of, over the last 10 or 12 years, have made it almost mandatory that if I'm going to work with an individual, I want to work with the whole team, because that seems to be what gets the best results.
So what's the difference between working with the principal and working with the rest of the team? I mean, our engagement included the board. So how, you're doing pretty serious stakeholder management. How do you think about the different stakeholders and what to say, what not to say, keeping confidentiality while also driving the results? Because at the end of the day, the CEO is the client, I would imagine, for the most part. So I imagine it gets confusing.
It sounds like it should, but oddly enough, it doesn't, because
that was a setup, by the way.
Thank you. For me, what I've found is there's one really simple principle that seems to be universal across every experience I've ever had, and that is if I genuinely care for the people that I'm around and working with, working for, everything else sort of works itself out as long as I couple that caring with transparency, right? And so you're making a good point that, if I'm working with a group, a management team, and, maybe there's 6 or 8 or 10 people, plus there could be a board and 5 or 7, even more directors. Somebody's going to say something to me that, if heard by one of the other people, is going to be an issue. It's going to create some sensitivities. It's going to start problems. And so I do always have to be aware of that. I do owe to all of my clients, a duty to confidentiality. But I found that if something comes up, usually if I just say to the person, if we're kind of talking one-on-one and maybe someone says, hey, this just isn't working with, Johnny for whatever reason. If I can understand more about that, then at the end of that, I can say, hey, listen, would it be okay if I talk to Johnny about this? And if the answer is yes, then I'm okay, right? Then there's transparency and there's openness, and I'm not going to catch anyone off guard. I still need to be tactful, obviously, in talking to people, but I've actually found this to be more helpful than detrimental, because now you have a kind of a third party who can help to bring issues up in what maybe feels like a safer way sometimes. But here's the important part, that people in my role, I think, have a responsibility to never ignore those kinds of issues, but to always encourage the team to try to talk about them.
So let's bring that full circle into facilitation. Once you're with the group, how do you bring all these things together? Because, I credit you with helping my last company achieve a great outcome for everyone involved, because you worked with us, I would say probably the year right before the sale. And there was different dynamics. There was some board tension. There was some executives who, were pretty green. And there was some conflict on the executive team. I was a pretty hard driving leader in kind of true founder mode. How do you take all this information into a facilitated session where you have to bring everything together?
Yeah, well, sometimes that's tricky. But first of all, I always love to take the opportunity to say this when we get to talk, that it was really the honor of my life to get to work with you and your team. I know that, for you, it maybe felt like it was a lot of stress and with the sale and the negotiation for the acquisition and all that stuff. But, and it was, there were those moments. But it really was just a treat for me to get to, especially because I got to see you take that company from nothing. It was really just you in a spreadsheet in the beginning, and how remarkable what you were able to do. So, but yes, that can be an issue. And, this sort of goes back to my ideas, though, that one, getting stuff out there is better. Talking about the stuff is better than not talking about it. This is basically true of every relationship that I know of, that no relationship ever got better that I'm aware of by not talking about something. And the other thing is that, and it goes back to also sort of that genuine care for the people and in this case, the corporation even, and the outcome. And I think the third thing that helps in those settings, and this can be tough, I see some other facilitators struggle with this sometimes. This is not a show for a facilitator to put on. It's not like a wedding DJ or something where you're meant to, sort of provide kitschy entertainment for stuff. That's, in my mind, that's not what the purpose of facilitating important discussions is. And I think sometimes people use those things maybe as icebreakers or whatever, but sometimes they maybe become too much a part of the experience. And I'm not so sure that that's helpful ultimately to the group. So, but I think, when groups of people get together and they have important things to talk about and they have different ideas about how to get from here to wherever they want to go, or even ideas about where they want to go at all, there are going to be conflicts, right? And a conflict is basically it's the perception of a divergence of interest. It's where, I think that the thing that you want isn't the same or same enough as the thing that I want. And now we've got some tension. Usually when people talk about this, they'll find that the thing that they perceived as conflicting isn't actually that much of a conflict. So talking about it usually fixes it. But even if it is a divergence of interests, you still got to talk about those things, because you got to figure out, like, is this serious enough that we just can't work together anymore? Is what that person wants, the direction they want to go, different enough from me and the rest of the team that it's just not a fit? If that's the case, we want to know that. So I think it's a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry, but I think the takeaway is it's a commitment to the truth, right? It's a commitment to just having the conversation, no matter where it goes and how tense sometimes it gets.
So that's a perfect segue to sharing my experience with you a little more deeply. Sometimes I was frustrated with you because you did not, kind of take my side, or you kind of kept quiet in a facilitated session where I wanted to kind of, nudge you and say, Simon, why don't you jump in here? Walk me through why you don't always do that. I would imagine the answer is because you don't believe it's in the best interest of the outcome, or you want to see things kind of resolve naturally. But walk me through why you don't always, kind of take the heat, as opposed to letting the principal do that.
Yeah. And let me start by just saying that everybody has a style, right? And not everybody's style is right for every client. And so you're right. You nailed it. That is probably part of my style to some extent, that I'm more likely to let things go a little longer before I inject myself into them, or before I take the side of one individual or another. And here's the reason why. And this comes down to sort of the philosophy of what facilitation and these kinds of working sessions really are all about. And in my mind, they're about two things. One, they're about answering questions, getting to strategic, answers about what we're going to do and why it's important and what's important. That's one thing, and nobody should ever, downgrade the importance of that in a facilitated session. We're there to get to something. But there's a second thing that's going on in these, and that is, think back to what I said before about habits, right? Every time you do something, you're enforcing or detracting from a habit. Part of what's going on in facilitated sessions with management teams is they're learning how to do this together, right? And so I think at some point, and it's a very thin line, and I don't know that I always get it right. As a matter of fact, I'm sure I don't. But I know that if I let the conversation go a little bit longer, maybe than I even think I should, or that I'm comfortable with, then I'm probably creating an opportunity for the group to be able to learn to make that habit even stronger, to be able to work together, to be able to get to answers. And so I think that if I talk too much in those sessions, if I push too hard for one thing or another as the facilitator, I think I might be robbing the group of an important experience to be able to get better with each other. And that's the reason why you saw me do those things.
Makes sense in retrospect. We are getting close to time. I would like to spend the next couple of minutes talking about some best practices for people who want to do what you do but aren't there. You obviously have a diverse background. We talked about how to leverage people's different chapters towards their specialty, whether it's a martial art, or whether it's a previous job, or whether it's a PhD. Can you talk about the education you received and how that's impacted how you show up? And following that question, what is some advice you would give for people who want to do what you do?
Yeah. So, I was a startup guy myself in the late 90s when the internet boom was, happening. I started some companies and did the whole raise venture capital and build the company and sell the thing and all that stuff. So I got out in about 2000, and I had some of the biggest venture capitalists in the US investing in my company. And what I found through that experience was I didn't really love venture capitalists. It wasn't.
For our listeners, you currently are one.
Yes, I know. This is a strange turn of events, isn't it? A different kind, I think. So, but one of the things that I found was that I was a young man in my 20s, right? And so I had a hard time sort of figuring out how to work with the board once the VCs came onto the board. And it got pretty acrimonious at times. And I just didn't know how to make it better. And so when I exited that and I had my sort of found myself with all this free time and resources, I thought, well, what do I want to do next? Like how could I do something meaningful that would be helpful and maybe make me better at this the next time? And so what I did was I went back to graduate school and I did a master's degree in conflict analysis and resolution. And I focused on the conflict that seemed to occur between boards and management teams. And it was an incredibly exciting time for me. And I picked up lots of good skills and I learned a lot about the way that people's mind in conflict situations tend to work. And as I look back, I sort of understood a lot more about what had happened in that company and with me and the VC board members. And so that was sort of education thing number one that I found really helpful. And when I finished that, I started doing some more consulting, and now I had this new set of skills. And so I started working with more startups that were, I specifically seeked out those companies that were having the same kinds of struggles because now I had something to give to them, right? And so I did that for a while. And then I thought, okay, I understand a lot now about the group dynamics, the kind of the combination of being in the fire service and living in that and seeing how that works, and now learning academically about conflict and getting to work with some people who are going through it. What I didn't understand enough about was sort of the underlying psychological principles that were driving that stuff at the more individual level. But I knew I didn't want to go to the clinical psychology route because I didn't want to talk about people's mothers, have them on the couch and that kind of stuff. And so industrial psychology made the most sense because I was able to kind of dig into some of the interesting dynamics, but apply them more at a macro level. Because industrial psychology is largely about the way that groups of people think and behave and what motivates them and why. So once I finished that, and in that training through my dissertation research, I was able to bring in the Aikido part of my background, which was great. And so I kind of did a little experiment on using principles of Aikido, the martial art, to help leaders cultivate skills in themselves to make them better leaders. And it was the focus, relaxation, and connection, which were the primary mechanisms through that research. So yeah, and so for me, you can see like it's almost like every one of my life experiences kind of added one block to this thing, right? And I guess that's where I would go to your second question, where you say like, if people want to be good at this and facilitating and helping teams and things like that, how would they do it? I think that it's if you've had the right set of experiences. If you started with a certain personality, probably is a little bit of it, but not much. I wouldn't think you can learn these things, but I think it's about having the experiences that build and build and build. And if you think about the most interesting people, and I think in many cases the most successful, and you have them talk back through their history, I think you hear a similar theme, right? That each thing they did was sort of a building block for what they ultimately became. And I think the neat part about that is, I'm 54 years old, but it's not over yet, right? I mean, it's still happening. I'm still having experiences now that are presumably building blocks for the thing that's going to happen next, of which I'm not sure what it may be. But so that's I think the answer is that it's the culmination of everything that you've done so far, plus a little bit of your own personality and worldview.
So to summarize what I heard you say is it's plotting out your story, understanding how those blocks put together, and then having a unique kind of perspective or take on how you show up. At the end of the day, no matter what, every facilitator is going to have the same outcome, which is creating a high performing team. And
that doesn't sound right, though, does it?
well, yeah. Well, which part doesn't sound right?
That could every facilitator in every experience get the same result?
Well, I mean, I imagine that's a great question. I imagine that everybody, everybody strives to meeting the goals of the team.
Oh, sure.
And I would imagine that most of those goals is having a high performing team. Unless, can you think of another goal?
No, I think that generally probably captures.
Yeah, it can be like we all have better chemistry. It can be like we all hit certain goals. I mean, it's not going to be like, or maybe, we're not meant for each other.
Right.
I guess that's another goal, or
that's a possible outcome. Yeah.
Right. But Right. So the goal can be is, can we work together, which is okay too. And frankly, I think when you came into my last company, Social Tables, I think that was one of the questions, frankly. And I think the answer was the board and I could not work well together without creating additional stress, and that was a decision point in order to sell. I think that was one of the
Yeah,
drivers.
but let me just add one caveat to that. I
Please.
think it's the board and management can't work together unless something changes. Like so I don't want to leave having dropped this concept that I believe that there are a lot of instances where it just can't work. I think there are some like that where it just can't work between two people or two groups of people, but I think those are very few and far between because human beings have an incredible capacity to be different if they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is goes back to one of the concepts we started earlier, which is why it's important to work with stakeholders together or teams together and stakeholders individually and build those bridges to the best of our ability.
Yeah, and to make not only individual habits but also team habits, right? So, maybe I'm an avoider. I'm not really much of an avoider, but let's just say that I'm an avoider. And let's say I decide, I don't want to be an avoider anymore. It's a huge percentage, by the way. 85 or so percent of the population are typically categorized as avoiders, meaning if there's something that tense, they're likely just to not engage with it because they just want it to go away. But we know that that's usually not very helpful, and so
Also cultural reasons
sure,
as well.
yeah. But let's just say I want to change that about myself. I can change that about myself, and in the same regard, a team can do that, right? So if a team says, "Hey, you know what? Collectively, we have a habit of just sort of avoiding the hard conversations," the team, the group of individuals, can make a decision to make that different, and they can do it, and it doesn't take that much time.
Hell yeah. Well, this has been exceptionally fun. I think this is officially the longest episode I've
Okay.
done.
Feel free to cut as
Feels
much
like
out
the
as you need to.
shortest. No, this was super valuable. Any parting words for retreat facilitators, regardless of their experience?
Yeah, I think really take the time to find out what the group wants, like really wants, and really take the time to understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then design the time around that. And that sounds so basic and obvious, but I don't know that it happens enough.
Right.
It's it's
I totally
it's
agree.
it's
I've heard that
yeah.
a lot,
It's
but
not the facilitator's time. We're there as a guest. It is the group's time, and it's the obligation of the facilitator to maximize the time and get the things out that the group wanted. And it's only on us if that doesn't happen.
right. And that probably involves not just showing up on day one, but having conversations prior, and those intention setting conversations.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Simon, thank you so very much. This has been a ton of fun, like I said, and I'll certainly see you very
Looking
soon.
forward to it. It's my pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.